with Maya Angelou. I know why the cage bird sings from chapter 8 to 14. Find the page. So we're in chapter 8. Stamps, Arkansas, was Chitlin Switch, Georgia, Hang Them High, Alabama. Don't let the sun set on you here, Mississippi, or any other name, just as descriptive. People in Stamps used to say that the whites in our town were so perdue that a black couldn't buy a vanilla ice cream, except on July 4th. Other days he had to be satisfied with chocolate. A light shade had been pulled down between the black community and all the things white, but one could see through it enough to develop a fear, admiration, contempt for the white things, white folks' cars, white glistening houses, and their children and their women, but above all, their wealth that allowed them to waste was the most inevitable. They had so many clothes, they were able to give perfectly good dresses, worn just under the arms, so to sewing class to our school for larger girls to practice on. Although there was always generosity in the black neighborhood, it was indulged on pain of sacrifice. Whatever was given by black people to other blacks was most probably needed as desperately by the donor as by the receiver, a fact which made the giving or receiving a rich exchange. I couldn't understand whites where they got the right to spend money so lavishly. Of course, I knew God was white too, but no one could have made me believe he was prejudiced. My grandmother had more money than all the white people. We owned land, houses, but each day Bailey and I were cautioned, waste not, want not. Mama brought 2 bolts of cloth each year for winter and summer clothes. She made my school dresses, under slips, Bulmers, handkerchiefs, Bailey's skirts, shorts, and his apron. House dresses, waist from the royal ship, 2 stamps by Sears and Roebuck. Uncle Willie was the only person in the family who wore ready to wear clothes all the time. Each day he wore fresh white shirts and flowered suspenders, and his special shoes cost $20. I thought Uncle Willie sinfully vain, especially when I had to iron 7 stiff starched shirts and not leave a cat's face anywhere. During the summer, we went barefoot, except on Sunday. We learned to resole our shoes when they gave out. As Mama used to say, the desperation must have hit the white section of Stamps with comic impact, but it speed into the black area slowly, like a thief with misgiving. The country had been in the throes of the desperation for 2 years before the blacks in Stamps knew it. I think that everyone thought that the desperation, like everything else, was for the white folks, so it had nothing to do with them. Our people had lived off the land and counted on cotton pickings, hoeing and chopping season to bring in the cash needed to buy shoes, clothes, books, lights, farm equipment. It was when the owner of the cotton fields dropped the payment of 10 cents for a pound of cotton to 8, 7, finally 5, that the black community realized that the Depression, at least, did not discriminate. Welfare agencies gave food to the poor families, black and white. Gallons of lard, flour, salt, powdered eggs, powdered milk. People stopped trying to raise hogs because it was too difficult to get slopped rich enough to feed them. and no one had the money to buy mash or fish meal. Mama spent many nights figuring on our tablet slowly. She was trying to find a way to keep her business going, although her customers had no money. When she came to her conclusion, she said, Bailey, I want you to make me a nice clear sign, nice and neat. And sister, you can color it with your Crayolas. I wanted to say, 1 5-pound can powder milk is worth 50 cents in trade. 1 5-pound can powdered eggs is worth $1 in trade. 10 2 cans of mackerel is worth $1 in trade, and so on. Mama kept her store going. Our customers didn't even have to take their slated provisions home. They picked them up from the welfare center downtown and dropped them off at the store. If they didn't want an exchange at the moment, they would put them in one of the big gray ledgers, the amount of credit coming to them. We were among the few black families not on relief, but Bailey and I were the only children in the town proper that we knew who ate powdered eggs every day and drank the powdered milk. Our playmates' families exchanged their unwanted food for sugar, coil oil, spices, potted meat, Vienna sausage, peanut butter, soda crackers, toilet soaps, and even laundry soaps. We were always given enough to eat, but we both hated the lumpy milk and mushy eggs. And sometimes we stopped off at the house of the poorer families to get some peanut butter, and crackers. Stamps was a slow coming out of the Depression, as it had been getting into it. World War II was well along before there was a noticeable change in the economy of that near forgotten hamlet. One Christmas we received gifts from our mother and father, who lived separately in heaven called California, where we were told that they could have all the oranges they could eat, and sun shone all the time. I was sure that wasn't so. I couldn't believe that our mother would laugh and eat oranges in the sunshine without her children until the Christmas when we received the gifts. I had been confident that they were both dead. I could cry any time I wanted by picturing my mother lying in her coffin. Her hair, which was black, was spread out on a tiny little white pillow, and her body was covered with a sheet. The face was brown, like a big old, and since I couldn't fill in the features, I printed mother across the O, and tears would fall down my cheeks like warm milk. Then came that terrible Christmas with an awful presence with our father. With the vanity I was to find typical, sent his photograph. My gift from mother was a tea set, a teapot, 4 cups and saucers, and tiny spoons, and a doll with blue eyes and rosy cheeks and yellow hair painted on her head. I didn't know what Bailey received, but after I opened my boxes, I went out to the backyard behind the china tree. The days was cold and the air as clear as water. Frost was still on the bench, but I sat down and cried. I looked up and Bailey was coming from the outhouse, wiping his eyes. He had been crying too. I didn't know if he had also told himself that they were dead and had been rudely awakened to the truth, or whether he was just feeling lonely. The gifts opened the door to questions that either of us wanted to ask. Why did they send us away? And what did we do so wrong? So wrong? Why? At 3 and 4, did we have tags put on our arms to be sent by train alone from Long Beach, California to Stamps, Arkansas, with only the porter to look after us? Bailey sat down beside me, and that time didn't admonish me not to cry. So I wept and he sniffed a little. But we didn't talk until Mama called us back into the house. Mama stood in the front of the tree that we decorated with silver ropes, pretty colored balls, and said, "You children is the most ungrateful things I did ever see. You think your mama and papa went to all the trouble to send you these nice these nice play pretties to make you go out in the cold and cry?" Either of us said a word. Mama continued, "Sister, I know you tender hearted, but Bailey Jr., there's no reason for you to set out mooing like a pussycat just 'cause you got something from Vivian and Big Bailey." When we still didn't force ourselves to answer, she asked, "You want me to tell Santa Claus to take these things back?" A wretched feeling of being torn engulfed me. I wanted to scream, "Yes, tell him to take them back," but I didn't move. Later, Bailey and I talked. He said if things really did come from Mother, maybe it meant that she was getting ready to come and get us. Maybe she had just been angry at something we have done, but was forgiving us and would send for us soon. Bailey and I tore the stuffing out of the doll that day after Christmas, but he warned me that I had to keep the tea set in good condition because any day or night she might come riding up. Okay, chapter 9. A year later, our father came to Stamps without warning. It was awful for Bailey and me to encounter the reality one erupted morning. We, or at any rate, I had built such elaborated fantasies about him and the illusionary mother that seeing him in the flesh shredded my inventions like a hard yank on a paper chain. He arrived in front of the store in the clear gray car. Bailey, who knew such things, said it was a Di Seto. His bigness shocked me. His shoulders were so wide I thought he would have trouble getting into the car. He was taller than anyone I had seen, and if he wasn't fat, which I knew he wasn't, then he was fat-like. His clothes were too small. They were tighter and woolier than was customary in Stamps, and he was blindingly handsome. Mama cried, "Bailey, my baby, great God, Bailey," and Uncle Willie stuttered, "Bubba Bailey." My brother said, "Hot dog and damn. It's him. It's our daddy." And my 7-year-old world Humpty Dumpty, never to be put back together again. His voice rang like a metal dipper hid in a bucket, and he spoke English, proper English, like the school principal, even better. Our father sparkled his ers and even his errors in his sentences, as liberated as he gave out his twisted mouth. And he smiled, his lips pulled down like Uncle Willie's, but not to the side, and his head laid on one side or the other, but never straight on the end of his neck. He had the air of a man who did not believe what he heard or what he himself was saying. He was the first cygnet I had met. So, this is Daddy's little man. Boy, anybody tell you that you're like me? He had Bailey in one arm and me in the other, and Daddy's baby girl. You ever been good children? Haven't you? Or I guess I would have heard about it from Santa Claus. I was so proud of him. It was so hard to wait for the gossip to get around that he was in town. Wouldn't the kids be surprised at how handsome our daddy was, and that he loved us enough to come down to Stamp to visit? Everyone could tell from the way he talked and from the car clothes that he was rich, and maybe he had a castle out in California. Then possibly of being compared with him occurred to me, and I didn't want any more to see him. Maybe he wasn't my real father. Bailey was his son, true enough, but I was an orphan that they picked up to provide Bailey with company. I was always afraid when I found him watching me and wish I could grow small like Tiny Tim. Sitting at the table one day, I held a fork in my left hand and pierced a piece of fried chicken. I put the knife through the second tin, as we had been strictly taught, and began to saw against the bone. My father laughed a rich roiling laugh, and I looked up. He intimidated me, both elbows going up and down. Is Daddy's baby girl going to fly away? Mama laughed, and Uncle Willie too. Even Bailey snarkled a little. Our father was proud of his sense of humor. For 3 weeks, the store was filled with people who had gone to school with him or heard about him. The courageous and envious smiled around. He shuddered, throwing ers all over the place and under the sad eyes of Uncle Willie. Then one day he said he had to get back to California. I was relieved. My world was going to be emptier and drier, but the agony of having him intrude into every private second would be gone. And the silent threat that I had hung in the air since his arrival, the threat of his leaving someday, would be gone. I wouldn't have to wonder whether I loved him or not, or have answered, does Daddy's baby want to go to California with Daddy? Bailey had told him that he wanted to go, but I had kept quiet. Mama was relieved too, although she had a good time cooking special things for him and showing her California son off to President of Arkansas. But Uncle Willie was suffering under our father's bombastic pressures. In Mother Bird fashion, Mama was concerned with her crippled offspring, that one could fly away from the rest. He was going to take us with him. The knowledge buzzed through my days and made me jump unexpectedly like Jack in the Box. Each day I found some time to walk to the pond where people went to catch sun, perch, and strip bass. The hours I chose to go were too early or late for fishermen, so I had the area to myself. I stood on the bank of the green dark water, and my thoughts skid like water spiders. Now this way, now that way, the other. Should I go with my father? Should I throw myself into the pond and not be able to swim? Join boldly of L.C., the boy who had drowned last summer? Should I beg Mama to let me stay with her? I could tell that I'll take over Bailey's chores and do my own as well. Did I have the nerve to try life without Bailey? I couldn't decide on any move, so I recited a few Bible verses and went home. Mama cut down a few giveaways that had been traded to her by white woman's maid and sat long nights in the dining room sewing jumpers, skirts for me. She looked pretty sad, but each time I found her watching me, she'd say, as if I had already disobeyed, "You be a good girl now, you hear? Don't you make people think I didn't raise you right, you hear?" She would have been more surprised than I had asked that I had she taken me in her arms and whelped at losing me. Her world was burdened on all sides with work, duty, religion, and her place. I don't think she had ever knew that a deep, broadened love hung over everything she had touched. In later years, I asked her if she loved me, and she brushed me off with "God is love. Just worry about whether you're being a good girl, then he'll love you." I sat in the back of the car with Dad's leather suitcase and our cardboard boxes. Although the windows were rolled down, the smell of fried chicken and sweet potato lay unmoving, and there wasn't enough room to stretch. Whether he thought about it, Dad asked, "Are you comfortable back there, Daddy's baby?" He never waited to hear my answer. which was yes, sir. Before he resumed his conversation with Bailey, he and Bailey told jokes, and Bailey laughed all the time, put out Dad's cigars, and held one hand on the steering wheel when Dad said, "Come on, boy, help me drive this thing." After I got tired of passing through the same towns over and over again and seeing the empty looking houses, small, unfriendly, I closed myself off to everything but the kissing sounds of the tires on the pavements and steady moans of the mortar. I was certainly very vexed with Bailey. There was no doubt that he was trying to butter up Dad, even started to laugh like him, a Santa Claus Jr. with ho ho ho. How are you going to feel seeing your mother? Going to be happy? He was asking Bailey, but it penetrated the form I had packed around my senses. We were going to see her. I thought we were going to California. I was suddenly terrified. Suppose she laughed at us the way he did. What if she had other children now, whom she kept with her? I said, I want to go back to Stamps. Dad laughed. You mean Daddy's baby don't want to go to St. Louis to see her mother? She's not going to eat you up, you know. He turned to Bailey and I and looked at the side of his face. He was so unreal to me. I felt as if I was watching a doll talk. Bailey Jr., ask your sister if why she wants to go back to Stamps. He sounded more like a white man than a black man. Maybe he was the only brown-skinned white man in the world. It was just be my luck that only one would turn out to be my father. But Bailey was quiet for the first time since we left Stamp. I guess he was thinking too about seeing Mother. How could an 8-year-old contain that much fear? He swallows and holds it behind his tongue. He tightens his feet and closes the fear between his toes. He contracts his buttocks and pushes the up behind the prostate gland. Junior's cat got your tongue? Why did you think your mother would say when I tell her children didn't want to see her? The thought that he would tell her shook me and Bailey at the same time. He leaned over the back of the seat. My, it's Mother dear. You know you want to see Mother dear. Don't cry. Dad laughed and pitched in his seat and asked himself, I guess, what will she say to that? I stopped crying since there was no chance to get back to Stamps and Mama. Bailey wasn't going to back me up, I could tell, so I decided to shut up and dry up and wait for whatever scene Mama dear was going to bring. St. Louis was a new kind of hot and new kind of dirty. My memory had no pictures of the crowded together shooting, covering buildings. For all I knew, we were being driven to hell, and our father was delivering the devil. Only in strict emergencies did Bailey allow me to speak pig lantern to him in front of adults, but I had to take the chance that afternoon. We had sprung around the same corner. I was sure about 50 times I asked Bailey, oh they, oh yea, ink they, is they, or are they, oh they, oh yea, they, e-way, big-a-day, appende. Bailey said, my, we're in St. Louis and we're going to see Mother dear. Don't worry. Dad chuckled and said, oh way, oh day, eighth way, oh way, AK, oh yea, oh day, oh day. I thought that my brother and his friends had cracked pig lantern. Hearing my father speak, it didn't startle me so much as it angered. It was simply another case of thickness of adults where children were concerned, another case in the point of grown-ups' betrayal. To describe my mother would be to write about a hurricane in its perfect power, or the climate, fallen colors of a rainbow. We had been received by her. by her mother and had waited on the edge of our seats in our over-furnished living room. We were both fearful of mother's coming and impatient at her delay. It is remarkable how much truth there is in the two expressions struck dumb and love at first sight. My mother's beautiful literally assailed me. Her red lips split to show even white teeth, and her fresh butter colored look see through clear. Her smile widened her mouth beyond her cheeks, beyond her ears, and seemingly through the walls to the street outside. I was struck dumb. I knew immediately why she had sent me away. She was too beautiful to have children. I had never seen a woman as pretty as she, who was called Mother. Bailey, on his first part, fell instantly and forever in love. I saw his eyes shining like hers. He had forgotten the loneliness and the nights we had cried together because we were unwanted children. He had never left her warm side or shared the icy wind of solitude with me. She was with his mother dear, and I resigned myself to his condition. They were more alike than she and I, or even he and I. They both had physical beauty and personality, so I figured it figured. Our father left St. Louis a few days later for California, and I was neither glad nor sorry. He was a stranger, and if he chose to leave us with a stranger, it was all of one piece. Chapter 10. Grandmother Baxter was a grand room or an octoroom, or in any case, she was nearly white. She had been raised by a German family in Cairo, Illinois, and had to come to St. Louis at the turn of the century to study nursing. While she was working at Homer G. Phillips Hospital, she met and married Grandfather Baxter. She was white, and he was black. While she spoke with authority German accent until her death, he had the choppy, spouting speech of the West Indians. Their marriage was a happy one. Grandfather had a famous saying that caused great pride in his family. By Jesus, I live for my wife, my children, and my dog. He took extreme care to provide that statement true by taking the word of his family in the face of contradictory evidence. The black section of St. Louis in the mid-30s had all the finest of all gold rush town. Forbidden gambling and their related vocations were also obviously practiced, that it was hard for me to believe that they were against the law. And I, as a newcomer, were quickly told by our schoolmates who the men on the street corners were as we passed. I was sure that they had taken their names from the Wild West books. And to prove me right, they had hung around in front of the saloons like unhorsed cowboys. We met the numbers running, gambling, lottery takers, and whiskers salesmen, not only in the loud streets, but in our living room as well. They were often there when we returned from school, sitting with hats in their hands, as we had done upon our arrival in the big city. They waited silently for Grandmother Baxter, her white skin, and that she dramatically took from her nose and let hang free on a chain pinned to her dress, were factors that brought her a great deal of respect. Moreover, the reputation of her 6 mean children and the fact that she was a captain compounded her powder and gave her the leverage to deal with even the lowest crook without fear. She had pulled with the police department so that the men in their flashy suits, flashy cars sat with church-like and waited to ask favors from her. If grandmother raised the heat of their gambling parlors or said the word that reduced the bail of a friend waiting in jail, they knew what would be expected of them. Come election, they would there to bring their votes from their neighborhoods. She most often got them, and they always brought them back into the vote. St. Louis also introduced me to thin sliced ham, jelly beans, peanut mix, lettuce on sandwich, and family loyalty families. In Arkansas, we were cured of our meat and ate half-inch slabs of ham for breakfast. But in St. Louis, we brought the paper-thin slice in stranger-smelling German store and add them in the sandwiches. If grandmother never lost her German accent, she also never lost her taste for the thick black German broth, which we bought unsliced. In stamps, lettuce was only to make a bed for potato salad or slot, and peanuts were brought in raw for the field and roasted in the bottom of the oven on cold nights. The rich scents used to fill the house, and we were always expected to eat too many, but that was a stamp custom. In St. Louis, peanuts were brought in paper bags and mixed with jelly beans, which meant that we ate the salt and sugar together, and I found them delicious treats, the best thing the big town had offered. When we enrolled in grammar school, we were struck by the ignorance of our schoolmates and the rudeness of our teachers. Only the vastness of the building impressed us. Not even the white school in stamps was as large. The students, however, were shockingly backwards. Bailey and I did at a mature level because of our work in the store, and we read well because in stamps there wasn't anything else to do. We were moved up a grade because our teacher thought that we country children would make our classmates feel inferior, and we did. Bailey would not refrain from remarking on our classmates' lack of knowledge. At lunchtime, in the large gray concrete playground, he would stand in the center of a crowd of big boys and ask who was the Napoleon Bonaparte, how many feet mile makes. It was in frightened Bailey style. Any of the boys might have been able to beat him with their fists, but if they did, they just had to do it again the next day, and Bailey never had a brief for frightened fear. He taught me that once. I got into a fight, I should grab for the balls right away. He never answered when I asked, suppose I'm fighting a girl. He went to school there a full year, but all I remembered hearing that I hadn't heard before was making thousands of egg-shaped thoughts will improve penmanship. The teachers were more formal than those we knew in stamps, and although they didn't whip their students with wishes, they gave them licks in the palms of their hands with rulers, and the stamps teachers were much friendlier, but that was because they were imported from Arkansas. Black colleges, and since we had no hotels or rooming houses in towns, they had to live with private families. If a lady teacher took a company or didn't receive any mail or cried alone in her room at night, by the week, and even the children discussed their morality, her loneliness, and other failures generally. It would have been near impossible to maintain formally under a small town of envisioned privacy. Okay. There's families in the background having fun at the park or at a pool, so don't mind the background noise. So, St. Louis teachers, on the other hand, tended to act very seated and talk down to their students from the lofty heights of education and white folks. The women as well as men all sounded like my father with their ers, and they walked with their knees together and talked through their tight lips as if they were afraid as to let the sound out. as two inhaled the dirty air that listening gate off. We walked to the school around the walks of the bricks, breach in cold dust, for one discouraging winter. We learned to say yes, no, rather than yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. Occasionally, mother, whom we seldom saw in the house, had us meet her at Lewis. It was a long, dark tavern at the night of the bridge near our school and was owned by two Syrian brothers. Okay. We used to come in the back door, and the sawdust stilled beer, steamed and boiling meat made me feel like I've been eating moth. Yeah, mother had cut my hair in a bob like hers and straightened it, so my hair felt skinned, and the back of my neck so bare that I was ashamed to have anything walk up behind me. Naturally, this kept me turning quickly as I was expecting something to happen. All right, let me see if I can. What is be right back? Hold on for 1 second. I'll be right back. At Lewis, we were greeted by mother's friend as Bible's darlings babies, and were given soft drinks and boiled shrimps, while we sat on the stiff wooden bolts. Mother would dance alone in front of us to music from the sea bird. I loved her most at times. She was like a pretty kite that floated just above my head. If I liked, I could pull it into me by saying I had to go to the toilet, or by starting a fight with Bailey. I never did either, but the power made me tender to her, right? The Syrian brothers vied for her attention as she sung the heavy blues that Bailey and I almost understood. They watched her even when directing their conversation to other customers, and I knew that they too were hypnotized by this beautiful lady who talked with her whole body and snapped her fingers louder than anyone in the whole world. We learned that the time stepped at Louis. It was from this basic step the most American black dances are born. It is series of taps, jumps, rest, demands, carefully listening, feeling, and coordination. We were brought before mother's friend. They're in a heavy saloon air to show our artistry. Bailey learned easily and has always been the better dancer, but I learned too. I approached the time step with the same determination to win that I had approached the times table with. There was no Uncle Willie or sizzling pot billiard stove, but there was mother and her laughing friends. They amounted to the same thing. We were applauded and given more soft drinks and more shrimp, but it was ways to be years later before I found the joy and freedom of dancing well. Mother's brothers, Uncle Tootie, Tom, and Ira were all well-known young men about St. Louis. They all had the city jobs, which I understand to have been no mean feat for black men. Their jobs and their families set them apart, but they were the best known for their unrelentless meaningless. Grandfather had told them, "Bah Jesus, if you ever get in jail for stealing or some such foolishness, I'll let you rot. But if you're arrested for fighting, I'll sell the house, lot, stock, and barrel to get you out." With that kind of encouragement, backed by explosion tempers, it was no wonder they became fearsome characters. Our youngest uncle, Billy, was not old enough to join in their crew. One of their more flamboyant escape has become a proud family legend. Pat Patterson, a big man, who was himself protected the shield of a bad reputation, made the mistake of cursing my mama one night when she was out alone. She reported the incident to her brothers. They ordered one of their hangers on to search the street for Patterson, and he was located to telephone them. As they waited throughout the afternoon, the living room filled with smoke and the murmurs of plans. From the time to time, grandfather came in from the kitchen and said, "Don't kill him. Mind you, just don't kill him." Then went back to his coffee with grandmother. They went to the saloon where Patterson sat drinking at a small table. Uncle Tommy stood by the door. Uncle Tootie stationed himself at the toilet door, and Uncle Ara was the oldest and maybe everyone's ideal. Walked over to Patterson. They were all obviously carrying guns. Uncle Ira said to my mother, "Here, BB, here's this Patterson. Come over here," and beat his butt. She crashed the man's head with a policeman's bully enough to leave him just the side of death. There was no police investigation, nor social reprobation. After all, didn't grandfather champion their wild tempers, and wasn't grandmother a near-white woman with police pull? I admit that I was thrilled by their meanness. They beat up whites and blacks with the same baton, and like each other so much that they had never needed to learn the art of making outside friends. My mother was the only warm, outgoing personality among her siblings. Grandfather became a burden during our stay there, and his children, spent their free time telling him jokes, gossiping with him, and showing their love. Uncle Tommy, who was gruff and chewed his words like grandfather, was my favorite. He strung accordion sentences together, and they came out sounding either like the most profound curses or like commercial poetry. A natural comedian. He never waited for the laugh. They knew he must follow his droll statements. He was never cruel, he was mean. When we played handball on the side of our house, Uncle Tommy would turn the corner. Coming from work, he would pretend at first not to see us, but with the feet of a cat, he would catch the ball and said, "Put your minds where your behinds are, and I'll let you on my team." We children were ranged around him, but it was only when he reached the steps that he wind up his arm and throw the ball over the light post and towards the stars. He told me often, "Ritty, don't worry, 'cause you ain't pretty. Plenty pretty women I've seen digging ditches or worse. You smart, I swear to God, I rather you have a good mind than a cute behind." They bragged often about the binding quality of the Baxter blood. Uncle Tommy said that even the children felt it before they were old enough to be taught. They reminisce over Bailey's teaching me to walk when he was less than 3. Displeased at my stumbling motion, he was supposed to have said, "This is my sister. I have to teach her to walk." They also told me how I got the name. After Bailey learned definitely I was his sister, he refused to call me Margaret, but rather addressed me each time as Maya, sister, and in later, more articulated years, after the near for bravery had shortened the appellation to Mai, it was elaborated into Maya. We lived in a big house on Caroline Street with our grandparents for half the year before mother moved us in with her. Moving from the house where the family was centered meant absolutely nothing to me. It was simply a small pattern in the grand design for our lives. If other children didn't move so much, it would just went to show that our lives were fated to be different from everyone else in the world. The new house was no stranger than other, except they were with mother. Bailey persisted in calling her mother dear until the circumstances of proximity softened the phrase's formality to ma dear, and finally to me dear. I could never put my finger on her realness. She was so pretty and so quick that even when she had just awakened, her eyes full of sleep and her hair tousled, I thought she looked just like a Virgin Mary. But what mother and daughter understood each other, or even the sympathy of each other's lack of understanding? Mother had prepared a place for us and went to it gratefully. We each other had a room with 2 sheeted bed, plenty to eat, and stored brought clothes to wear. After all, she didn't have to do it. If we got on her nerves or if we were disobedient, she couldn't always send us back to stamps. The weight of appreciation and the threat, which was never spoken, of returning to Mama, were burdens that clogged my childhood wits to impassivity. I was called old lady and chid for moving and talking like winter's molasses. Mother's boyfriend, Mr. Freeman, lived with us, or we lived with him. He was a southerner too, and big, but a little flabby. His breasts used to embarrass me when he walked around in his undershirt. They laid on his chest like flat titties. Even if mother hadn't been such a pretty woman, light-skinned with straight hair, he was lucky to get her, and he knew it. She was educated from a well-known family. And after all, wasn't she born in St. Louis? Then she was gay. She laughed all the time and make jokes. He was grateful. I think he must have been many years older than she. But if not, he had the sluggish inferior of old man married to a younger woman. He watched her every move, and when she left the room, his eyes allowed her reluctantly to go. Chapter 11. I had decided that St. Louis was a foreign country. I would never get used to scurrying sounds of flashing toilets, or packed foods, or doorbells, or the noise of the cars and trains and buses that crashed through the walls or slipped under the doors. In my mind, I only stayed in St. Louis for a few weeks. As quickly as I understood I had not reached my home, I sneaked away to Robin Hood's forest and caves of Alley-oop, where all the reality was unreal and even the changed every day. I carried the same shield that I had used in stamps. I didn't come to stay. Mother was competent in providing for us, even if that meant getting someone else to furnish the provision. Although she was a nurse, she never worked at her profession while we were with her. Mr. Freeman brought in the necessity and earned extra money cutting poker games and gambling parlors. The straight 8 to 5 world simply didn't have enough glamour for her. It was 20 years later that I first saw her in a nurse uniform. Mr. Freeman was a foreman in Southern Pacific Yards and came home late sometimes after Mother had gone out. He took his dinner off the stove where she had carefully covered it, and which she had admonished us not to bother. He ate quietly in the kitchen while Bailey and I read separately and greedily our own Street and Smith pulp magazine. Now that we had spending money, we bought the illustrated paperback with their godly pictures. Mother was away. We were put on honor system. We had to finish our homework, eat dinner, and wash the dishes before we could read or listen to the Lone Ranger, Crime Busters, or The Shadow. Mr. Freeman moved gracefully, like a big brown bear, and seldom spoke to us. He simply waited for Mother and put his whole self into the waiting. He never read the paper or patted his foot to the radio. He waited. That was all. If she came home before he went to bed, we saw the man come alive. He could start out of the big chair like a man coming out of sleep, smiling. I would remember then a few seconds before I had heard a car door slam. Then Mother's footstep would signal from concrete walk. When her key rattled the door, Mr. Freeman would have already asked his habitual question, "Hey, Abibi, have a good time?" His squirrel would hang in the air while she sprung over to peck him on the lips. Then she turned to Bailey and me with the lipsticks. "Haven't you finished your homework?" If we had, we were just reading. "Okay, say your prayers and go to bed." If we hadn't, then go to your room and finish. Then say your prayers and go to bed. Mr. Freeman's smile never grew. It stayed at the same intensity. Sometimes Mother would go over and sit on his lap, and then the grin on his face as it would stay there forever. For our rooms, we could hear the glasses cling and the radio turn up. I think she must have danced for him on the good nights because he couldn't dance. But before I fell asleep, I often hear feet shuffling to dance rhythm. I felt very sorry for Mr. Freeman. I felt very sorry for him as I had held for a litter of helpless pigs born in our backyard in Stamps in Arkansas. We fattened the pigs all year young for slaughter on the first good frost, and even I suffered for the cute little winkling things. I knew how much I was going to enjoy the fresh sausage and hogs, head cheese they could have given me only with their deaths. Because of the lurid tales we read, our vivid images, and probably memories of our brief but hectic lives. Bailey and I were afflicted, he physically and I mentally. He shuddered, and I swear through horrifying nightmares. We was constantly told to slow down and start again. And on my particular bad nights, my mother would take me into sleep with her in her large bed with Mr. Freeman. Because of the need for stability, children easily became creatures of habit. After the third time in mother's bed, I thought there was nothing strange about sleeping there. One morning she got out of bed for an early errand and I fell asleep again, but I woke up to a pressure and a strange feeling on my left leg. It was too soft to be a hand, and it wasn't the touch of clothes. Whether it was, I hadn't encountered the sensation in all the years of sleeping with Mama. It didn't move, and I was too startled too. I turned my head a little to the left to see Mr. Freeman was awake and gone, but his eyes were open and both hands were above the cover. And I knew if I had always known it was his thing on my leg. He said, "Just stay right there, Reedy. I'm not gonna hurt you." I wasn't afraid, a little apprehension, maybe, but not afraid, of course. I knew that lots of people did it and they used their things to accomplish the deed, but no one I knew had ever done it to anybody. Mr. Freeman pulled me to him, but his hands between my legs, he didn't hurt. But Mama had drilled into my head, "Keep your legs closed and don't let nobody see your pocketbook." Now I didn't hurt you. Don't get scared. He threw back the blankets and his thing stood up like a brown ear of corn. He took my hand and said, "Feel it." It was mushy and squirmy like the inside of a freshly killed chicken. Then he dragged me on top of his chest with his left arm, and his right hand was moving so fast. His heart was beating so hard, so I was afraid that he would die. Ghost stories revealed how people who died wouldn't let go of whatever they were holding. I wondered if Mr. Freeman died holding me, how would ever get free? Would they have to break his arms to get me loose? Finally, he was quiet, then came to the nice part. He held me so softly I wish he wouldn't even never let me go. I felt at home. From the way he was holding me, I knew he would never let me go or let anything bad ever happen to me. This was probably my real father, and we had found each other at last. But then he rolled over, leaving me in a wet place, and stood up. "I gotta talk to you, Reedy." He pulled off his shorts and had fallen to his ankles and went into the bathroom. It was true that the bed was wet, but I knew I hadn't had any accident. Maybe Mr. Freeman had one while he was holding me. He came back with a glass of water and told me in a sour voice, "Get up, you peed in the bed." He poured water on the wet spot, and it did look like my mattress on my many mornings. Have lived in the southern strictness, I knew when to keep quiet around adults, but I did want to ask him why he said I peed when I was sure he didn't believe that. If he thought I was naughty, would that mean that he would never hold me again, or admit that he was my father, or he had made me ashamed of me? "Reedy, you love Bailey?" He sat down on the bed and I closed, hoping yes. He was bending down, pulling on his socks, and his back was large and friendly. I wanted to rest on my head on it. "If you ever tell anybody what we did, I'll have to kill Bailey." "What we have done?" "We?" Obviously, he didn't mean me peeing the bed. I didn't understand. I didn't dare ask him. It had something to do with his holding me, but there was no chance to ask Bailey either because that would be telling what he had done. Then thought that he might kill Bailey stunned me. After he left the room, I thought about telling Mother that I hadn't peed in the bed. But then if she asks me what happened, then I'll have to tell her about Mr. Freeman holding me. And that wouldn't do. It was the same old news I had always lived. There was an army of adults whose motives and movements I couldn't just understand and who made no effort to understand mine. There was never any question of my disliking Mr. Freeman. I simply didn't understand him either. For weeks after, he said nothing to me except the gruff hellos which were given without ever looking into my direction. This was the first secret I had ever kept from Bailey, and sometimes I thought he should be able to read it on my face, but noticed nothing. I began to feel lonely for Mr. Freeman and the encasement of his big arms. Before, my world had been Bailey, food, Mama, the store, reading books, and Uncle Willie. Now, for the first time, it included physical contact. I began to wait for Mr. Freeman to come in from the yard, but when he did, he never noticed me, although I put a lot of feeling into "Good evening, Mr. Freeman." One evening, when I couldn't concentrate on anything, I went over to him and sat quite quickly on his lap. He had been waiting for Mother again. Bailey was listening to the shadow and didn't miss me. At the first, Mr. Freeman sat still, not holding me or anything. Then I felt a soft lump under my thigh, beginning to move. It twitched against me and started to harden. Then he pulled me to his chest, and he smelled of coiled dust and grease. And he was so close, I buried my face in the shirt and listened to his heart. It was beating just for me. Only I could hear the thud. Only I could feel jumping on my face. And he said, "Sit still, stop squirming." But all the time he pushed me around on his lap. Then suddenly he stood up and slipped down to the floor. He ran to the bathroom. For months he stopped speaking to me again. I was hurt and for the time felt lonelier than ever. But then I forgot about him. And even the memory of his holding me preciously melted into the general darkness just beyond the great blinkers of childhood. I read more than ever and wished my soul that I had been born a boy. Algar was the greatest writer in the world. His heroes were always good, always won, and were always boys. I could have developed the first two virtues, but becoming a boy was sure to be difficult, if not impossible. The Sunday funnies influenced me, and although I had admired the strong heroes who'd always conquered in the end, I identified with Tiny Tim in the toilet where I used to take the papers. It was torturous to look for and excluded the unnecessary pages so that I can learn how he would finally outwit his last adversaries. I wept with relief every Sunday as he included the evil men and bounded back from each seeming defeat as sweet and gentle as ever. The Katazjammer kids were fun because they were made the adults look stupid, but they were a little too smart alerky for my taste. When spring came to St. Louis, I took out my first library card, and since Bailey and I seemed to be growing apart, I spent most times of my Saturdays at the library, breathing in the world of penniless Sunshine boys, who with goodness and perseverance became rich and rich men, and gave baskets of goodies to the poor on holidays. The little princesses who were mistaken for the maids, and the long-list children mistaken for wives, became more real to me than our house, our mother, our school, or Mr. Freeman. During those months, we saw our grandmother and the uncles, but they usually asked the same question: have you been good children? For which there was only one answer. Even Bailey wouldn't have dared to answer no. Chapter 12. On a late spring Saturday, after our chores were done, Bailey and I were going out. He to play baseball and I to the library. Mr. Freeman said to me after Bailey had gone downstairs, "Reedy, go get some milk for the house." Mother usually brought milk when she came in, but that morning as Bailey, I straightened the living room, her bedroom door, and had been open, and we knew that she hadn't come home that night before. He gave me the money and I rushed to the store and I back to the house. After putting the milk in the icebox, I turned and I had just reached in the front when I heard Reedy. He was sitting in the big chair in the radio. "Reedy, come here." I didn't think about the holding time until I got close to him. His pants were open and his things was standing out of his brisket by itself. "No, sir, Mr. Freeman." I started to back away. I didn't want to touch the mushy hard thing again, and I didn't need him to hold me anymore. He grabbed my arm and pulled me between his legs. His face was still and looked kind, but he didn't smile or blink his eyes. Nothing. He did nothing except reach his left hand around to turn on the radio, without even looking at it. Over the noise of music and static, he said, "Now, this ain't gonna hurt you much. You like it before, didn't you?" I didn't want to admit that I had in fact liked his holding me, or that I had liked his smell or the hard heart beating, so I had said nothing. And his face became like the face of one of those mean natives the Fatum was always having to beat up. His legs were squeezing my waist. "Pull down your drawers." I hesitated. For two reasons. He was holding me too tight to move. I was sure that any minute my mother or Bailey or the Green Hornet would burst in the door and save me. We was just playing before he released me enough to snatch down my bloomers, and then he dragged me closer to him. Turning the radio up loud, too loud, he said, "If you scream, I'm gonna kill you. And if you tell, I'm gonna kill Bailey." I could tell he meant what he said. I couldn't understand why he wanted to kill my brother. Neither of us had done nothing to him. And then there was the pain of breaking and entering, when even the sense of torn apart. The act of rape on an 8-year-old body is a matter of the needle given because the caramel can't. The child gives because the body can, and the mind of a violator cannot. I thought I had died. I had woke up in a white-walled world, and it had to be heaven. But Mr. Freeman was there, and he was washing me. His hands shook, but he held me upright in the tub and washed my legs. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Reedy. I didn't mean to, but don't you tell. Remember, don't you tell a soul." I felt cool and very clean and just a little tired. "No, sir, Mr. Freeman, I won't tell. I was somewhere above everything. It's just that I'm so tired I'll just go and lay down a while. Please," I whispered to him. I thought if I spoke out loud, he might become frightened and hurt me again. And he dried me and handed me my bloomers. "Put these on and go to the library. Your mama out to be coming home soon. You just act natural." Walking down the street, I felt the wet on my pants, and my hips seems to be coming out of their socket. I couldn't sit long on the hard seat in the library, so I walked by the empty lot where Bailey was playing ball, but he wasn't there. I stood for a while and watched the big boys tear around the dusty diamond and then headed home. After 2 blocks, I knew I'll never make it, not unless I counted every step and stepped on every cack. I had started to burn between my legs more than the time I've wasted solemn on myself. My legs throbbed, or rather, the insides of my thighs throbbed, with the same force that Mr. Freeman's heart had breathing. Thrum step, step on a crack, thrum step. I went up the stairs one at a time. No one was in the living room, so I went straight to the bed after hiding my red, yellow strain drawers under the mattress. When Mother came in, she said, "Well, young lady, I believe this is the first time I've seen you go to bed without being told you must be sick." I wasn't sick, but the pit of my stomach was on fire. How could I tell her that? Bailey came in later and asked me what the mattress matter was. There was nothing to tell him. When Mother called us to eat, I said I wasn't hungry. She laid her cool hand on my forehead and cheeks. "Maybe it's the measles. They said they're going around the neighborhood." After she took my temperature, she said, "You have a little fever. You probably just caught them." Mr. Freeman took up the whole doorway, then Bailey out not to be in there with her. "Unless you want a house full of sick children," she answered over her shoulder. "He may as well have them now as later. Get them over with." She brushed by Mr. Freeman as if he were made of cotton. "Come on, Junior, get some cold towels and wipe her sister's face." As Bailey left the room, Mr. Freeman advanced to the bed. He leaned over, his whole face a threat that could have smothered me. "If you tell," and again softly, I almost didn't hear it. "If you tell," I couldn't summon up the energy to answer him. He had to know that I wasn't going to tell anything. Bailey came in with the towel and Mr. Freeman walked out. Later, Mother made a broth and sat on the edge of the bed to feed me. Then the liquid went down my throat like bones. My belly and behind were as heavy as cold iron, but it seemed my head had gone away and pure air had replaced it on my shoulders. Bailey read to me from the Rover Boys until he got sleepy and went to bed. That night I kept waking to hear Mother and Mr. Freeman arguing. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I did hope that she wouldn't make him so mad that he would hurt her too. I knew he could do it with his cold face and empty eyes. Their voices came in faster and faster, the high sounds on the heels of the lows. I would have liked to have gone in, just passed through as if I was going to the toilet. Just show my face, they might stop. But my legs refused. Okay. My legs refused to move. I could move the toes, ankles, but the knees had turned to wood. Maybe I slept, but soon morning was there. Mother was pretty over my bed. "How are you feeling, baby?" "Fine, Mother." An instant answer. "Where's Bailey?" She said he was still asleep, but that she hadn't slept all night. She had been in my room off and on to see about me. I asked her where's Mr. Freeman was. Her face chilled with memory and anger. "He's gone. Moved this morning. I'm going to take your temperature after I put on your cream of wheat." Could I tell her now? The terrible pain assured me that I couldn't. But what he did to me and what I allowed must have been very bad if already God let me hurt so much. If Mr. Freeman was gone, did that mean Bailey was out of the danger? And if so, if I told him, would he still love me? After Mother took my temperature, she said she was going to bed for a while, but to wake her if I felt sicker. She told Bailey to watch my face and arms for spots, and they came up. He could paint them with calamine lotion. That Sunday goes and comes in my memory like a bad connection on an overseas telephone call. Once Bailey was reading the Tazier Jammer Kids to me. Then, without a pause for sleeping, Mother was looking closely at my face, and soup trickled down my chin, and soon got into my mouth, and I choked. Then there was a doctor who took my temperature and held my wrist. Bailey, I suppose, I had screamed, for he materialized suddenly. I asked him to help me, and we'll run away to California or France or Chicago. I knew that I was dying. In fact, I longed for death, but I didn't want to die anywhere near Mr. Freeman. I knew that even now he wouldn't have allowed death to have me unless he wished it to. Mother said I should be bathed, and the linens had to be changed since I had sweat so much. But when they tried to move me, I fought, and even Bailey couldn't hold me. Then she picked me up in her arms, and the terror battled for a while. Bailey began to change the bed. As he pulled off the soled sheets and the panties I had put under the mattress, they fell at Mother's feet. Chapter 13. In the hospital, Bailey told me that I had to tell who did that to me, or the man would hurt another little girl. When I explained that I couldn't tell because the man would kill him, Bailey said only, "He can't kill me, I won't let him." And of course, I believed him. Bailey didn't lie to me, so I told him. Bailey cried at the side of my bed until I started to cry too. Almost 15 years passed before I saw my brother again cry. Using the old brain he was born with, he gave his information to Grandmother Baxter, and Mr. Freeman was arrested and was spared the awful wrath of my pistol whipping uncles. I would have liked to stay in the hospital the rest of my life. Mother brought flowers and candies. Grandmother came with fruit, and my uncles clumped around my bed, snorting like wild horses. When they were able to sneak Bailey in, he read to me for hours. They are saying that people who have nothing to do becoming busybodies is not only the truth. Excitement is a drug, and people whose lives are filled with violence and are always wondering where the next fix is coming from. The court was filled. Some people even stood behind the church benches in the rear. Overhead, fans moved with detachment of old men. Grandmother Baxter's clients were in there in gay and inflammate array, the Gambelins in pinstrip suits, and their makeup deep woman whispers to me, and out blood red mouth that now I knew as much as they did. I was 8 and grown. Even the nurses in the hospital had told me that now I had nothing to fear. The worst is over for you, they had said. So I put the words in all the smirking mouths. I sat with my family, and they rested still on the seats like cold grays, stone thick and forevermore unmoving. Poor Mr. Freeman twisted in his chair to look empty threats over to me. He didn't know that he couldn't kill Bailey, and Bailey didn't lie to me. Wait, was the defendant wearing? That was Mr. Freeman's lawyer. I don't know. You mean to say this man raped you and you don't know what he was wearing? He snarked as if I had raped Mr. Freeman. Do you know if you were raped? I sound push in the air of the court. I was glad that Mother had let me wear the navy blue winter coat with brass buttons, although it was too short and the weather was typically St. Louis hot. The coat was a friend that I hugged to me in the strange and unfriendly place. Was that the first time the accuser touched you? The question stopped me. Mr. Freeman had suddenly done something very wrong, but I was convinced that I had helped him to do it. I didn't want to lie, but the lawyer wouldn't let me think, so I used silence as a retreat. Did the accuser try to touch you before the time he, or rather you say he raped you? I couldn't say yes and tell them how he had loved me once for a few minutes and how he had held me close before he had thought I had peed in my bed. My uncle would kill me, and Grandmother Baxter would stop speaking, as she often did when she was angry, and all those people in the court would stone me as they stoned the harlot in the Bible. And Mother, who thought I was such a good girl, would be disappointed. But most importantly, there was Bailey. I had kept a big secret from him. Margaret answered the question. Did the accuser touch you before the occasion on which you claim he raped you? Everyone in the court knew the answer had to be no. Everyone except Mr. Freeman. And I looked at his face heavy, trying to look as if he would have liked me to say no. I said no. The lie limped in my throat, and I couldn't get it air out. How I despised the man for making me lie. Oh, me nasty thing, oh, black nasty thing. The tears didn't soothe my heart as they usually did. I screamed, oh, me, dirty thing you did, dirty old thing. Our lawyer brought me off the stand into my mother's arm. The fact that I had arrived at my desired destination by lies made it less appealing to me. Mr. Freeman was given 1 year and 1 day, but he never got a chance to do it this time. His lawyer got him released that very afternoon. In the living room, where the shades were drawn for coolness, Bailey and I played Monopoly on the floor. I played a bad game because I was thinking how I would be able to tell Bailey how I lied, and even worse, for our relationship, kept a secret from him. Bailey answered the doorbell because Grandmother was in the kitchen. A tall white policeman asked for Mrs. Baxter. And had they found out about the lie, maybe the policeman was coming to put me in jail because I had sworn on the Bible that everything I said would be the truth, the whole truth. So help me God. The man in our living room was taller than the sky, wider than my image of God. He just didn't have the beard. Mrs. Baxter, I thought to known. Freeman's been found dead on the lot behind the slaughterhouse. Softly, as if she was discussing a church program, she said, poor man. She wiped her hands on this towel and just softly say, do they know who did it? The policeman seems like he was dropped there. Some say he was kicked to death. Grandmother's colored only rose a little. Tom, thanks for telling me. Poor man. Well, maybe it's better this way. He was a mad dog. Would you like a glass of lemonade or some beer? Although he looked harmless, I knew he was dreadful angel, counting out my many sins. No thanks, Mrs. Baxter. I'm on duty. Gotta be back. Well, tell your ma that I'll be over when I'll take up my beer, and remind her to save some kraut for me. And the recording angels was gone. He was gone, and a man was dead because I lied. Where was the balance in that? One lie surely wouldn't be worth a man's life. Bailey could have explained it all to me, but I didn't dare ask him. Obviously, I forfeited my place in heaven forever, and I was gutless as the doll I ripped to pieces ages ago. Even Christ himself turned his back on Satan. Wouldn't he turn his back on me? I could feel the evilness flowing through my body and waiting, penned up to rush off my tongue. If I tried to open my mouth, I claimed my teeth shut. I hold it in. If it escaped, wouldn't it float the world and all the innocent people? Grandmother Baxter said, Reedy, and Junior, you didn't hear a thing. I never want to hear the situation nor the evil man's name mentioned in my house again. I mean that. She went back into the kitchen to make apple strudel for my celebration. Even Bailey was frightened. He sat all to himself, looking at a man's death, and a kitten looking at a wolf, not quite understanding it. but frightened all the same time. In those moments, I decided that although Bailey loved me, he couldn't help. I had sold myself to the devil, and there could be no escape. The only thing I could do was to stop talking to people other than Bailey. Instinctively, or somehow I knew that because I loved him so much I never hurt him. But if I talked to anybody else, that person might die too. Just my breath, carrying my words out, might poison people. Then they'll curl up and die like the black fat slugs that only pretended. I had to stop talking. I discovered that to achieve perfect personal silence, all I had to do was to attach myself to sound. I began to listen to everything. I probably hoped that after I had heard all the sound, really heard them and packed them down, deep in my ears, the world would be quiet around me. I walked into the rooms where people were laughing, their voices hitting the walls like stones, and I simply stood still in the midst of the riot of sounds. After a minute or two, silence would rush into the room from its hiding place because I had eaten up all the sounds. In the first week, my family accepted my behavior as a post-rape, post-hospital affliction. Okay? They understood that I could talk to Bailey, but not to nobody else. They came to the last visit from the visiting nurse, and the doctor said I was healed. That meant that I should be back on the sidewalks playing handball or enjoying the games I had been given when I was sick. When I refused to be the child that they knew and accepted me to be, I was called imprudent and my mutinous sulness. For a while I was punished for being so uppity that I wouldn't speak, and then came the thrashing given any relative who felt himself offended. We were on the train going back to Stamps, and this time it was I who had to console Bailey. He cried his heart out the aisles of the coach and pressed his little boy body against the window pail, looking for the last glimpse of his mother dear. I never knew if mother sent for us, or the St. Louis family just got fed up with my grim presence. There is nothing more appealing than a constantly mourning child. I cared less about the trip than about the fact that Bailey was unhappy and had no more thought of our destination than if I had simply been headed for the toilet. Okay, chapter 14. The bareness of Stamps was exactly what I wanted with our consciousness. After St. Louis, with its noise and activity, its truck in buses and loud families gatherings, I welcomed the obscure lanes and lonely bungalows set back deep in the dirt yards. The resignation of its inhabitants encouraged me to relax. They showed me a continent based on the belief that nothing more was coming to them, although a great deal was more due. Their decision to be satisfied with life's inequalities was a lesson for me. Entering Stamps, I had the feeling that I was stepping over the borderlines of the map and would fall without fear right off the end of the world. Nothing more could happen, for in Stamps, nothing happened. Into this cocoon I crept. For an indeterminate time, nothing was demanded of me or Bailey. We were, after all, Mrs. Henderson's California grandchildren, and had been away on a glamorous trip way up north to the fabulous St. Louis. Our father had come to the year before, driven a big shiny automobile and speaking the King's English with a big city accent. So all we had to do was lay quiet for months and rack in the profits of our adventures. Farmers, maid, cooks, handymen, carpenters, and all the children in the town made regular pilgrimage so to the store just to see the travelers. They stood around like cut out cardboard figures and asked, "Well, how's it up north? See anything of them big buildings? Ever ride in one of them elevators? Was you scared? White folks any different like they say?" Bailey took it upon himself to answer every question, and from the corner of his living imagination wove a tape stride of entertainment for them that I was sure as a foreigner to him, and it was to me. He, as usual, spoke precisely. They have in North buildings so high that for months in the winter you can't see the top floors. Tell the truth, they've got watermelons twice the size of a cow's head and sweeter than syrup. I distinctively remembered his intent face and fascinated faces of his listening. And if you can count the watermelon seeds before it's cut out open, you can win $5 zillion and a new car. Mama, knowing Bailey, warned, "Now, Jew, be careful. You don't slip up on not a truth. Everybody wears new clothes and have inside toilets. If you fall down in one of them, you get flushed away into Mississippi River. Some people have ice boxes, only the proper names is ice spot or refrigerators. The snow is so deep you can get buried right outside your door and people won't find you for a year. We made ice cream out of the snow. That was the only fact that I could have supported. During the winter, we had collected a bowl of snow and poured pet milk over it and sprinkled it with sugar and called it ice cream. Mama beamed and Uncle Willie was proud when Bailey regaled the customers with an exploit. We were drawing cards for the store and objects of the town's adoration. Our journey to the magical places alone was a spot of color on the town's drab canvas, and our return made us even more the most inevitable of people. High spots and stamps were usually negative: droughts, floods, lynches, and deaths. Bailey played on the country's folks' need for division. Just after our return, he had taken to sarcasm, picked it up as one picked up a stone, and put it snuff-like under his lip. The double entendres, the two proclaimed sentences, slid over his tongue to the dart rapier-like into anything that happened to be in the way. Our customers thought generally we were so straight thinking and speaking that we were never hurt by his attacks. They didn't comprehend them. Bailey Jr. sound just like Big Bailey, got a silver tongue just like his daddy. I can tell that they don't pick cotton up there. How the people lived then. Bailey said that the cotton up north was so tall, if ordinarily people tried to pick it, they would have to get up on the ladders. So the cotton farmers had their cotton pickup machines. For a while, I was the only recipient of Bailey's kindness. It was not that the pitied me, but he felt we were in the same boat for different reasons, and that I could understand his frustration, just as he could counter my withdrawal. I never knew if Uncle Willie had been told about the incident in St. Louis, but sometimes I caught him watching me with a far-off look in his big eye. Then he would quickly send me on some errands that would take me out of his presence. When that happened, I was both revealed and ashamed. I certainly didn't want a crippled sympathy, nor did I want Uncle Willie's, whom I loved in my fashion, to think of me as being sinful and dirty. If he thought so, that at least I didn't want to know. Sounds came to me dully, as if people were speaking through their handkerchiefs or with their hands over their mouths. colors were the true either, but rather a vague assortment of shaded pastels that indicated not so much color as faded familiars. People's names escaped me, and I began to worry over my sanity. After all, we had been always less than a year a customer's whole accounts I had formerly remembered without consulting the ledger were now complete strangers. People except Mama, Uncle Willie accepted my unwillingness to talk as natural outgrown of reluctant return to the South, and the indication that I was pinning for the high times we had in the big city. Then, too, I was well known for being tender hearted. Southern blacks use that term to mean sensitive and tendered, to look upon a person with the affliction as being a little sick or in indicated health. So I was not so much forgiven, I was understood. Okay, that's the end of chapter 14, and the next chapter we will read on the next live. Okay, thank you. Bye.